So, Pali. Pali is the canonical language of Theravāda Buddhism. It is one of the three main schools of Buddhism. The other two are Mahayana and Vajrayana. And this branch of Buddhism is predominantly found in Sri Lanka and in Southeast Asian countries like Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, and Burma, or Myanmar. And Pali is the language of the Pali canon, which contains one of the oldest collections of the Buddha's teachings. But here's the thing. Pali was not the Buddha's mother tongue. The Buddha lived in a region called Magadha, in which is now present-day Bihar in India. And that region's local dialect, local spoken dialect, was a Middle Indo-Aryan dialect called Magadhi Prakrit. And Magadhi Prakrit is a dead language. So that means it has no living speakers. It was never standardized. It was never written down. Ancient sources mention that the Buddha encouraged his disciples and monks to teach and speak in a local vernacular, not in Sanskrit, which was the elite language of the Vedas or the Hindu scriptures. So this context and regional linguistics make Magadhi Prakrit the most likely language that the Buddha may have spoken. So Magadhi Prakrit, it eventually evolved into different languages, different modern languages that we still speak today, such as Maithili, which is spoken in present-day northeastern India and parts of Nepal, and Bengali, which is spoken in Bangladesh. It didn't just vanish, it morphed over time, pretty much what happened to Latin, how it evolved into Italian or French. After the Buddha's death, monks gathered at the very first Buddhist council, and that council was attended by many of the Buddha's remaining disciples, such as Venerable Ananda and Venerable Ubali, and they were there to recite his teachings, basically to preserve his teachings over the course of generations. Fast forward to the 3rd century BCE, like 3 centuries later, the Emperor Ashoka, who was a patron of Buddhism and who helped spread the religion across the Indian subcontinent, he helped formalize the canon and systematize the canon in the 3rd Buddhist Council. So around 100 BCE, Sri Lanka decided to write down the Pali canon for the very first time. So Sri Lanka was facing a difficult period of war and famine, and there was always this uncertainty, this fear that the Buddhist teachings might be lost forever. So they decided to collect these palm leaves, these very durable palm leaves, and started inscribing the Buddha's teachings onto the leaves, which we now call palm leaf manuscripts. And we can still find these manuscripts in many regions, many parts of Southeast Asia, including Sri Lanka. And this is how the present-day Pali canon came to be. So, centuries later, a Sinhalese scholar and venerated monk by the name of Buddhaghosa started to systematize his tradition, and then he started translating older Sinhalese commentaries into Pali. Buddhaghosa is the author of the Visuddhimagga, or the Path of Purification, which is a very complex and vital and comprehensive manual on Buddhist meditation that a lot of Theravādan Buddhists still use and practice to this day. It was just a way of making things easier for monks and scholars across the Indosphere to access the Buddha's teachings. So I would say the closest living language to Pali would be Sinhalese. It's no surprise because Sri Lanka has a long Buddhist history, very long, and a lot of the Sinhalese words come directly from Pali. And it's also the same as in Southeast Asia. Like a lot of the Southeast Asian languages like Thai, Khmer, Lao, and Burmese, a lot of the loan words come from Pali as well. And Pali is a very sacred language. I mean, it's still used nowadays, but primarily for chanting, for sermons, for study. Like if you go to Sri Lanka or Thailand or Myanmar and you go to temples, you will still hear monks chanting Pali as part of their training. So let's move on to the grammar, which is a lot. Pali, first of all, is an inflected language, which means that the role a word plays in a sentence, whether it's a subject or the object, is shown by changing the ending of the words. This is very different from English, where word order is key, but in Pali, word order is almost like non-existent, because in Pali, the endings tell you who is doing what to whom, so the word order is pretty much flexible. Let's start with the nouns. So Pali nouns are, about names, ideas, things, people, etc. So each noun changes depending on its case, which shows its grammatical role in a sentence. And there are 8 cases in total, starting from the nominative all the way to the vocative. For example, the word Buddha changes to Buddho when it's the subject, and it changes to Buddham when it's the object. For instance, in the famous phrase, Buddham Saranam Gacchami, which means I take refuge in the Buddha, the Buddham there is the object. So nouns in Pali also have gender. So there's masculine, feminine, and neuter. And then the ending also changes depending on if the noun is singular, plural, or dual. Now onto verbs. It's a lot. I think the most complex part of Pali grammar would be the verbs. Because the thing is, verbs in Pali change depending on the tense, whether it's past, present, or future. They change depending on the gender, whether it's masculine, feminine, or neuter. They change depending on the number, whether it's singular, plural, or dual. For simplicity's sake, let's just take a very common verb, karoti, which means to do, to perform, to commit a deed. And a karoti itself, it has so many forms. Like if the present indicative is karoti, which means he or she does. If it's the passive, it's kariyati, it is done. If it's the causative, it's kareti, he causes to do. And the imperative is karotu, let him or let her do. We're looking at like 50 to 70 distinct forms of the verb karoti alone. And that is a lot. Here's a snippet from the Ratana Sutta, or the Jewel Discourse, which is a very popular sutta discourse, a popular chant in Southeast Asia. And this discourse basically praises the 3 jewels, or the 3 gems, or the triple gem, which refers to the Holy Trinity of Buddhism, basically. We've got the Buddha, the Sangha, and the Dhamma. And here's a verse from that discourse, which says, Kincha piso kammam karoti papakam kayena vacha utachetasawa. This means whatever evil deed he or she does by body, speech, or mind. So you can see right here that the noun comes first, and then the verb, and then the adjective. So it's more like deed, do, evil. So the verb karoti here is in the present indicative, which is in the base form. Think of Pali as a subject, object, verb language. Because in English, it's not like that, right? It's more about subject, verb, object. In English, we say the boy throws the ball, but in Pali, we would say the ball throws. And a lot of Asian languages also follow this SOV structure, including Japanese, Korean, Hindi, and Tibetan. In terms of sounds, the Pali alphabet has a total of 43 letters in transliteration, including 10 vowels and around 33 consonants. And the consonants themselves are grouped in the way they're pronounced, whether they are gutturals or palatals or labials. I'm actually quite familiar with Pali nouns, mainly because I grew up in Myanmar and in Thailand. And these are the 2 countries where Theravāda Buddhism is predominant and it's most widely practiced. So it's not a surprise, because a lot of the daily words that people use in Thailand or in Myanmar, a lot of those words are just loan words that derive from Pali, like I mentioned. So for me, learning Pali has felt like reconnecting with my past rather than just starting everything from scratch. For example, the word akusala, which means unwholesome deed, is akuson in Thai and akutho in Burmese. And the same word for Dhamma. In Thai, that would be Dhamma, and in Burmese, it would be Dhamma. The same way as for the word dukkha, which means suffering or unsatisfactoriness. If it's in Thai, it's tuk, and if it's in Burmese, it's dukkha. So you can see and clearly hear that the resemblance is very uncanny. So let's move on to vocabulary, because Pali vocabulary is also very fascinating. Fascinating because many of the words can't be translated into other languages, say English, without losing some of their core meaning. Like what I just said about the word dukkha, even though dukkha means suffering overall in a general context, it can mean many things. It can mean unsatisfactoriness. It can mean discontent. It can mean stress. So another word is sati, which means mindfulness. So sati does not always mean to be mindful. It also means to be aware, to stay in the present, to awaken, to get up. As you can see, it has so many meanings. So here's a quick guide on how certain letters are pronounced in Pali. Take the letter C, for example. The C is pronounced ch, as in chair. So when I say the word mind, it would be pronounced chitta, not sita. And the same thing as the letter N with the symbol on top. I don't know how you call it, probably a tilde. I could be wrong. But the funny thing is that it's pronounced the exact way that it's pronounced in Spanish, like as in niño. So if I want to say the word wisdom in Pali, that would be panya. And one of the most effective ways to actually memorize and learn Pali effectively is to read short discourses from the Pali canon. If the Pali canon seems very heavy for you, you could always start with more simple text like the Dhammapada. So chanting is also quite essential because, like for example, take the phrase "Sabbe Satta Sukhi Hontu," which means "May all beings be happy." When you're chanting this Pali phrase, you're not just parroting sounds, you're not just like imitating words. You're basically trying to convey the meaning of that phrase, which is compassion. May all beings be happy. Another advantage I found is the contextual nature of language itself. Like Pali often uses the same root but in different forms. Like take the word kaya, for example. That word means body, the physical body. And if I say kaya nupassana, it becomes contemplation of the physical body, which technically just means body meditation. All right, let's talk about learning resources. There is an abundance of resources on Pali on the internet, through apps, through websites, through videos, audio files, etc. But I personally feel like it's not as abundant as, compared to other classical languages like Latin or Greek or Sanskrit. And one thing I love about Pali is that all the resources that I find on the internet, they are free. And they should always be free. Personally, for me, I think the best resources that I go to for Pali has to be Access to Insight and Sutta Central. With regard to dictionaries, there are a lot of very good dictionaries on the internet, on the apps, on the websites, very user-friendly and very navigable. But my favorite would be the Critical Pali Dictionary, which is designed and managed by the Pali Tech Society. For audio resources, there are plenty on YouTube. You could check it out. All right, let's move on to challenges and tips. Like I said, Pali is a liturgical language. That means it's not something that you speak in daily life. It's not like Spanish or Japanese where you can go out, go to a coffee shop and order coffee. It's not how it works. Pali just isn't spoken. So naturally, you're bound to forget the language because you're not using it in context. So one way I overcome is to connect everything that I learned to meaning. Like going back to what I said about, reading discourses from the Pali canon or even simple text from the Dhammapada can actually enrich your learning experience. Honestly, chanting is your best ally. Like if you're watching this video, you're probably a Buddhist and you probably love chanting like I do. So like I said, when you chant, you're not just parroting sounds, you're not just imitating sounds, but you're being mindful and you're being aware of what you're saying, and you're internalizing both the structure and the rhythm of the language. You're also training your ear, training your voice, training your memory. And I find it just really fun, to be honest. And I also like it when I get to analyze, when I get to start to feel the language instead of just speaking it. And like I said, there's a lot of vocabulary, right? So one way that I memorize languages, because I love learning languages, but I've realized that when I learn Pali, I can't learn it in a way that I learn Spanish or Japanese. Like, for instance, in Pali, I would just try to group words based on, like, I would categorize them. Like, for example, if I want to talk about people, I would just group all these words associated with people into one category. Like, for example, bhikkhu, which means mendicant or monk, or acharya, which means teacher, or iti, which means women. So I would just group them together and just label it people. Like the same way as for like, if I want to group mental qualities, like I would group words like metta, loving kindness, upekha, equanimity, panya, wisdom, karuna, compassion, and then just group them together and just label it mental qualities. I think that is, for me at least, it's quite an effective way to memorize Pali vocabulary. Also, fun fact, if you are already familiar with Southeast Asian languages like Thai or Burmese, it's going to be so easy for you to actually learn Pali. There are tons of overlaps because, like I mentioned in the beginning, a lot of the Southeast Asian languages, they have these loan words from Pali. So it's pretty much the same. Like if I take the word mental defilement, which is called kilesa in Pali, that would be pronounced as kilet in Thai and kileda in Burmese. So you can see, again, the resemblance is there. Like depending on whether you're in Thailand or in Sri Lanka or in Myanmar, the pronunciation, the script, and the rhythm of Pali is going to change. Sometimes quite drastically, especially when we talk about Burmese Pali and Thai Pali, two of which I'm quite familiar with. So I'm going to start from there. So let's start with Thai Pali. So Thai Pali has a tendency to drop or weaken the final consonants. It's just the nature of the Thai language itself, because Thai language often simplifies syllable endings into open syllables. Like take the word sila, for example, which means morality. And if it's in Thai, pretty simple. You drop the A, you drop the final vowel, you drop the final letter. So it becomes sin. I think it's because Thai is a very tonal language, and the original Pali rhythm and stress is reshaped drastically by Thai phonology. So Burmese, on the other hand, does not exactly have the S sound, because Burmese replaces the S sound with a the sound. This is because the Burmese language doesn't really have an equivalent of the retroflex or the dental S that is prevalent, that is common in Pali or in Sanskrit. So for example, if I want to go back to the two words, sila and sankara, if it's in Burmese, it would be thila, which means morality. And if it's sankara, it would be thinkara. So they like to replace the S sound with the sound. That's because in Burmese phonetics, a lot of the aspirated consonants like the or k or p are more common compared to sibilants like S, which is like less frequent and less adapted. And additionally, each country developed its own tradition of chanting the Pali canon, the discourses in the Pali canon. Like Thai chanting tends to be slower, more deliberate, and smoother, I would say. But when it comes to Burmese chanting, it's a lot faster. And sometimes if you listen intently, it doesn't even sound like Pali at all. Because like I said, a lot of the Pali words or letters have sibilants in them, and Burmese just doesn't have them. So sometimes it's like you're listening to an entirely different language. Like you could search for, let's say, the Metta Sutta, the loving kindness discourse. And if you listen to this discourse side by side with Thai monks and Burmese monks chanting the same discourse, you would be shocked by the drastic difference in melody and in rhythm and in tone. Personally, I used to like Burmese like chanting style because I was born in Myanmar, so I got used to it. But over time, I feel like I'm also starting to get used to the Thai chanting. So, why study Pali? When we talk about Pali, the first question that comes to people's mind is why bother studying such an intricate and complex language at all? And besides, it's a dead language, so what use can you get from it? I think the answer lies in what Pali represents. Pali is the language of the earliest Buddhist scriptures that is known as the Pali canon. And these texts contain the direct teachings, the undistorted, pure teachings of the Buddha himself that has been preserved remarkably over thousands of years. By studying Pali, you're gaining access to the original words and meanings without relying solely on translations, because when you translate something, especially in Pali, you tend to miss out the nuances and the cultural context of the language itself. And studying Pali also opens up a deep, authentic connection to the Buddha's teachings and to the Buddha himself, not just intellectually, but also experientially. Like when I read or chant the Buddhist scriptures, it profoundly enriches my understanding of, the Buddhist doctrines. Like, let's say, the three marks of existence, or the three universal characteristics, or the Four Noble Truths, or dependent origination. Studying Pali, I believe, offers a very unique and rewarding journey. It's not just the language, it's the path to the heart of the Buddha's teachings. So that's pretty much it for my little TED talk on the language of the Buddha. I'll see you guys again next time. Ciao.